And we're live. Thank you everybody for joining. We're starting with a different streaming setup. So those viewing this on YouTube and Twitter, can you please let me know that the audio is coming in? Can you hear what we're saying? And if not, please let me know because we'll need to switch something up. But it should be coming in. Or maybe someone even here in the audience can check real quick to see. Just so we don't get the show on the road prior. I'll check. Yeah, it works. Great. Cool. Okay, Mai. It's a pleasure to have you. For those who don't know, Mai is a founder of Satyam, which we'll get into exactly what that is. But first, I want to talk to you about something that I think everybody here is wondering about, myself included. You're currently on day 16 of a hunger strike. So how are you feeling?
It's with each day, I feel more and more honored that this is what we have the awareness to choose to do and the power to choose to do, that we can stand up in nonviolent resistance and lead it. And even if it means hunger striking until we end the atrocities, then we will lead it. It's one of the strongest forms of nonviolent resistance. It was used previously, also in the recent history, not a very old history. Also, women in Liberia, for example, Gandhi, and many other people used the hunger strike as a form of resistance, but also connection to all of us. So, yeah,
So
it's both.
You feel like it's an honor, but how are you feeling physically, mentally? I imagine 16 days is not easy on the body and the mind.
Definitely, it's easier than not doing really something. At least for me, this is my third time in long fasting. I have done it before, and this is my third time. So it is again. I think that we cannot distinguish the spiritual field from activism field, from nonviolent resistance field. A lot of what connects us as humans is our spirituality, and the power of this spirituality is actually, it's extremely powerful. It's not what we like think it is. I don't know how, like it is such a deep process within, that it actually empowers, it actually empties this temple from the daily food and intake and take to the more of the emptiness of this physical temple, and more joining a deeper level of our humanity and striking for a deeper level of not only ending, what is the starvation in Gaza, but ending oppression systems. And to this, I think it gives a lot of power to mental and psychological, and yeah, and the community. I'm grateful Satyam is a community, so I'm also held, which also supports big time. I think being alone could make it more challenging, but I'm very blessed. I have a community around me, and some of them are also hunger striking with me, and those who are not, they are holding us through this journey. So yeah.
Well, I commend your strength, putting yourself through this to stand up for what's right. So you said you're doing this with other. How many more people are currently hunger striking, and what are the actual demands? What would need to happen before you begin eating again?
I don't know the exact number of people. Every day we have Zoom, so it's adding every day. We have a map and links that we can share with people, that they can go and look to what is happening also on our media, Satyam, Homeland. People can follow up with all of the hunger strike, especially the numbers and all of the map. Our demands is ending starvation, ceasefire, complete ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and the bigger goal is a global liberation where this systematic oppression, the systematic weapon industry will not continue to win over our humanity. It's for all of us to acknowledge it's not Gaza, it's from Gaza to our humanity, it's from Gaza to all of us. It's not only what is happening in Gaza, what's happening in Gaza compared to what is happening in the outer world. There is at least an awakening in Gaza, and I think this is the call from Gaza to Yemen to Lebanon to Syria to America to everywhere that is living this atrocity of weapon industry. And one part of it is, the Israeli occupation, the genocide, the starvation that is taking place now.
Is this have you guys gotten media attention yet for the hunger strike? Because I imagine that's part of where the power comes from, right? You put yourself through something so extreme that it creates waves. It gets a lot of attention and it brings awareness to the cause that you're striking for.
Yeah, definitely. It's getting attention daily, more and more attention and more people joining. We have a group, a big group organizing the strike in Germany. Soon we'll join the whole movement. We are preparing with them also with journalists, diplomats, same in America. Reconsider in the film, there is another way, which I am part of it, is also taking a stand. So yes, it is growing bigger, but to us, it doesn't start from the system. We want it to start from us, normal people, humans that have no other intentions but to truly be in it and to truly free each other on basis of justice for everybody. And then get the media attention and then get the diplomats' attention, but not to start from the system, believing that we can change the system, because it's a lost circle. We have tried it for many years, almost 77 years of occupation and other oppression systems, other places, and it did not work. But we have witnessed nonviolent resistance. When nations gathered, when humans came together, then we witnessed really change. Then media came. And this is for us, is the biggest success, having the community gather every day and growing through the community, growing in the normal streets with normal musicians and artists and writers and diplomats and normal teachers and universities and students of all fields, with elders, with natives, with everyone. So it's a bit of a different goal. And on the other side of the statistics, normally hunger strikes takes 30 days at least before they really hit. And for us, we see we are already, it is already going very much viral, more than we expected that it would go in the first 2 weeks. And it's a human call.
Now, I remember from our introduction call that we had, I think it was just last week, you started sharing with me how as a kid, as a youth, you were violent and you supported violent resistance, and you've had a transformation to nonviolence. And now Satyam is very much an organization run by both Israelis and Palestinians, and that you believe that there's no way to achieve peace without doing it together. Can you talk a little bit about your journey, how you went from one end to where you have arrived to now?
I must correct myself if I said I was a violent child. I don't think there is a violent child that exists. It is called the violent resistance when used certain strategies of violence. I used the stones, I used everything that was possible to my childhood and teenage age to resist the occupation. I come from East Jerusalem, a Mount of Olives, a village called Bethany, Bethania, Lazarus, where Lazarus was raised from death by Jesus. So it's a Christian Muslim in East Jerusalem village. And I was born to the first Intifada Two parents each held a different political identity, one Palestinian, one Israeli citizenship or residency. And they were believers of peace. They were believers of openness and believers that this land always held Jewish, Christians, and Muslims in its narrative, and this is the only way for it to be in peace. And they fought for it until the Oslo and until Rabin was stolen from the peace agreement. And it really made them disappointed. It really contributed to the separation of thousands and thousands of families and lands. The failure of the Rabin and Oslo as well, which contributed to my family, together with hundreds of thousands family being separated. We couldn't visit my mom because she's in East Jerusalem, but we are also in East Jerusalem. But we have the Palestinian ID. And back then it was my teenage age. I'm seeing the invasion of military, the curfews that could go for 40 days and more, holding us for hours and hours while it's going to schools, making us stand under the rain 8 hours, 9 hours until they felt they are done with us, and then they would say, yalla, yalla, go to school. So yes, I took more of a violent strategy of resisting. My intentions were never to kill no one. I don't believe anyone in resistance against oppression system has the intentions to kill. I believe the intention is to be free. And yeah, I grew at the age of 16. My mom got to meet me in my resistance, and she had to take a lead. And she had a very strong conversation with me about education, and that if I wish to free Palestine, then I must be an educated woman, maybe a therapist, and then I will understand the trauma, and I will wonder who is asking to kill who. So I did. I traveled. She traveled me for my education, and I came back. Up until the age of 28, I didn't talk to a normal Jewish person, only on the checkpoints, only in investigations, in jail. And then I had my daughter. I got married to a man from East Jerusalem. I carried a West Bank ID. So my daughter Aram, who's now 14, was again in a family that is split. She couldn't be with me because I'm from the West Bank side. So Israel doesn't believe in my right of motherhood. So again, and I was very blessed when she was a year old to receive an invitation, a phone call to translate. And it happened that I translated one of the first nonviolent communication trainings that came to the Middle East. And it was in that community center that I met the first normal Jewish person with no weapon, not resisting them, but just meeting with them and hearing their stories and their narrative. And also meeting with Palestinians who were my example in my resistance, like Slimani al-Khatib, the co-founder of Combatants for Peace. And that exact training, talking about his also choice of what is called violent resistance and stabbing two Israelis, and while he's in jail at the age of 14, he was in jail for more than 11 years. He studied nonviolent resistance and communication and the journey of Gandhi and other journeys, and decided that when he leaves jail, he will choose nonviolent resistance. And then he created Combatants for Peace. And he is our neighbor. Hizma is the sister neighbor of Aizariya, the town I came from. So our family already knew each other. He was my example to resistance. I followed him before he became a nonviolent leader. And meeting him there brought a lot of awareness to me, brought a lot of awareness to the trauma, a lot of awareness to the oppressed and the oppressor theories, a lot of awareness to the Holocaust and how the European world, countries, and America dealt with the Holocaust and dealt with the Jewish. And yeah, I got to meet them as humans, and I got to love them as humans when we were allowed to meet as humans behind this system in one of the corners of this land. And yeah, it did. It changed my life and the life of my family. We became holders of that community, me and my brothers. And now one of my brothers is married to a Jewish Israeli with 2 kids. Adam is almost 5 years old, and Layla is a year and a half. And they are in Germany now because of the conflict in this land, because of the occupation. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. So then it's almost like discovering Combatants for Peace and that philosophy helped transform your worldview, or the founder from Combatants for Peace specifically.
It's not like, it's not like finding the philosophy. The philosophy was very much understood to me. Again, I don't believe there is any human who are born to be violent, We are born to be peaceful and to love each other. So to me, it was more meeting with another strategies that could lead to justice with less harm. And with more absence of war and tragedies and atrocities. But it's also very powerful and very human and very out and very leading and very standing and very changing. So meeting the action of that philosophy helped supported me understand that yes, if it has power and if it can make a change, then I am a believer of that change. I again never wanted to harm, but wanted to stand up for my right and my worth as a human on this land with complete freedom and justice. Yeah.
And so what inspired you to found Satyam, and what is it that Satyam does?
It was the first community, that specific community, Ikumi, where I met the first Israelis, and I met with the nonviolent dialogue and resistance, and got to learn it, and got to, in the past few years, also teach it and facilitate it. To me, the fact of having a community space, again, to meet normally as humans, as spiritual humans, to sit, to talk, to grieve, to fight, to argue, to disagree, but to love and to acknowledge, was extremely life-shifting, not only for me, but hundreds of other Palestinians. This Ikumi community is continuing until today. It's thousands of people, and it came out with many families, Israelis, Palestinians, Israelis and Germans, Germans and Palestinians. And through the way it affected me and holding it for 8 years, made me such a big believer of a tribe, of community. This is exactly what the system wants us to forget, that we cannot do it without the tribe. We cannot do it without the community. And the moment we become individuals is the moment that the system actually wins against us and makes us enemies. And to me, on the 7th of October, the first thing, while he's talking to a friend on the phone, the first thing that came to my mind is that we cannot do this without a community space. We have to take the courage. We have to stand up. We have to show what do we mean when we say freedom. What does tomorrow look when we are all free together? So together with David Genati, Talia Hirsch, and many different people, we decided to reopen it again, and we started it in Bejala. We do a lot of work, different work, like grief circles, joint, also grief circles for Palestinians. In VC nonviolent dialogue trainings, and we facilitate, host as well on it. We also do trauma work, a lot of different events. We host other organizations, we host other groups of people. During the war, most of the 99.9 of the hotels wouldn't take joint work because of the normalization. So for us, it was also a way to allow the opportunity for Israelis and Palestinians to meet, even though there is the war, even though there is the 7th of October and everything that is happening. It shall not separate us. There shall be a place where we even come more together. So we started it, and now it is, it's growing. And soon, for example, in 2 weeks, we have a grief circle happening here in an NBC training retreat with the storytelling, public speaking. And after we do all of this training, we end it with taking action all the time, whether in the protective presence or leading protests or water or ecology or whatever it means. Then this is what we do, art and music as well. Then each one that is in the training gets to join a team that are taking action in different spaces, in with different organizations, in different, like in the Jordan Valleys, in Farisiya, in Masafar, Yatta, Kardala, Bardala. So we also direct them how to take action, and we connect them. And we also give the space for the activists to have a place to come to be held. A lot of us in this field, we go through a lot of harassment, physical harassment and mental harassment, investigations and jail. And with Satyam, it was one of the biggest reasons to open it, is to give a space for all these foreigners who continue to come and to support, but yet need a community and wish to be part of and wish to be held when they come, and not to have to be alone, but to remember again who we are and our essence, and how powerful we are when we are together, and the power of community into taking actions.
It sounds like a beautiful community, one we need more of. If people listening to this want to be a part of this, is this open to anyone? And if so, how can people join?
Yeah, it is open again through our media and emails. We can share the links with you. People can go on Instagram and Facebook and write Satyam Homeland, and it will direct you to our pages. It will allow you to also follow up with what's happening, to see the Zoom, for example, for tomorrow, to join, take the conversations also from there, connecting to the community. And also through the website, satyamhomeland.org, people can see what is happening. On YouTube, we also have a channel for the best 16 Zooms, almost of the hunger strike and other things that's been happening in Satyam. And I can send the email also for people on the chat now, the ones that wants to connect. I just did, and then we can share the links with them or add them to the newsletters. And everyone is welcome. There is a huge need of we are creating, due to what is happening in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. There is a huge big need for a protective presence, for a trauma therapist, for people to come stand with the communities, with the shepherds, lead art, lead music with the kids and with the youth who are going through lots of traumas because of settlers' invasions and attacks and violence in different spaces here. So it is open. The wish is to have more people joining and more activism happening, through activism that would lead to us, all of us choosing each other fully, and not having to choose between each other, a Palestinian or an Israeli or an American, but to choose all of us. So yes.
So you could count me in for the next event. I'll be there.
Thank you, dear.
And
it would be an honor.
For those watching this on YouTube, I put the link to the website in the description, so you could also connect. And to some of the viewers, I hope you join as well. I hope to see you there. And we also dropped it here in Discord. All right, I think we'll open it up to some audience questions. You could either submit a question via text or raise your hand and we'll bring you on stage. I do see we have a question. This isn't directly to you, Mai, but it's more so, I imagine it's kind of like a rhetorical question, but I will respond to it. Paul Tosland says, make it make sense. They claim to be starving, yet Kazem ice cream parlor in Gaza City is currently open. It's not the only place either. So, Paul, I think there's this like misconception that there's zero food in Gaza. That's not the case. There's food scarcity. So when you have food scarcity, prices rise significantly. So those who are better off financially could still afford food and even a luxury like ice cream. But it's not about what can the upper class afford. It's what are the masses eating? Do they have food insecurity? And it seems like the food insecurity has set in, and so has malnutrition. There's already a few children. These are primarily children who had pre-existing conditions, but who have already passed away from not having the right nutrition. So we're already seeing children die from lack of food. But no, you will find food in Gaza. It's not like there's no food.
There is only 20% left of Gaza. Only 20%. And in this 20%, the food, the 1 kilo of wheat is 25 shekels, which people have already nothing there. And there is a lot of links for those who are doubting that we continue to also post. I personally post on my personal Facebook also page with all the resources of people, more than 300 people being killed every day while it's going to get their food. It's very hard videos, but they are all over media. If you go to TikTok and you just put Gaza live, then you will see people actually taking live videos of the dying out of starvation and eating sand. And yeah, I acknowledge it is something really hard to believe. But again, I think media is all over the place, and there is a lot of resources to actually see what is actually happening. And also in the Zooms, we have people from within Gaza coming to talk and sharing with us what is happening. And I also wish to share, it is not only about food. We deserve 10 meals a day, 20 meals if we wish. We deserve 50 if we wish. We deserve the freedom to choose when to eat and what to eat and how to eat. We deserve all of this. This should not be even asked or wondered, is there a starvation? There is a starvation, there is war, there is a genocide. And again, our children, our women, our men, our humans, hostages, prisoners of these oppression systems deserve much more than what we are talking about. This is the main basic that we should not even be questioning, because it's given by Earth. It's not given by humans. So, yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, you bring up a good point. You know, there's often a lack of people have a lack of compassion for Palestinians, many on the pro-Israel side, but at the very least, think about the lack of food that the hostages are currently facing. And it's interesting because at least the publicly stated reason for limiting food into Gaza is so that Hamas can't get their hands on it. But you need to think that strategy is going to first starve the people. Hamas will have storages of food that people won't have access to. So the people will starve before Hamas does. And it's going to, first and foremost, harm the very young and the elderly. Rachel asked,
there is a lot of points to talk about. Even this Hamas is starving. The main root of this, and even the founder of Hamas and Fatah, is Israel. So the main source is actually the oppression system, and Israeli government is the ones that created Hamas and Fatah. And I would like to invite you guys to also watch the Zooms of Combatants for Peace on YouTube from Shahnin and Abner's, the co-founders, who talk actually about taking even part of creating Hamas and Fatah, and what was behind it and the reasons to it. And of course, there are to me, Hamas and the Israeli military are the same. I don't distinguish this. The ones who kill are the ones who kill. The ones are part of the system are part of the system. There is no distinguish. The choice of violence doesn't distinguish between a Palestinian who is or a Hamas or an Israeli IDF. It's the same choice, the same strategy of killing people that we don't know, as Abner continued to say, or thinking less of people that we don't know. And yeah, we need to, in order to acknowledge, it's exactly like the Holocaust, acknowledging the Holocaust happened is what lead to actually true healing with the Jewish nation. And it's the same with acknowledging what is happening now, what's been happening for the past 76 years that actually led to what is happening today.
Thank you, Mai. It seems like something on the stream that it's not showing up. Give me 1 second. There seems to be a minor technical difficulty. Yeah, okay, that's weird. It's showing up black on stream. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, once we have our own platform, we're not going to need to deal with none of this bullshit, but for now we still are. Hold on. Okay, for whatever reason, our video is not showing up on stream, but people could still hear us. So sorry, stream. If you want to see us, you got to join Discord. There's a link for that in the description or on my bio if you're watching this on Twitter. Cool. Let's continue. So Rachel asks, what does Satya mean? I'm wondering, given the study of nonviolence, if it has any connection to the Sanskrit word Satya.
Yes, it is the Sanskrit word Satyam, truth as it comes. Yes, it is inviting all our truth. We each have a truth to us, to our humanity. And this is what we wish to welcome each other with, this truth, and to meet each other with this truth. So yes, it is very much connected. It is the same word.
Good catch, Rachel. Luddy Van Beet is asking, if there will become a Palestinian state in existence, how many Jews, Christians, and other religions are allowed to live in Palestine in security, given that it will be an Islamic state?
I don't know why it should be given that it's an Islamic state. It was never only an Islamic land. And again, this is the creation of Israel, Islamophobia, Islam in here. Up until 1999, even our society was not a conservative society. It's a society that, of course, a lot of its people believes in Islam, but not conservative. I am from a Muslim family. Here I am, sitting in the West Bank. Hundreds and hundreds of women are like me. We choose our freedom and our lifestyle. It is not what people like to assume, this Islamophobia in our family. And at the same time, it again carries a culture that we love and we respect. I don't see two-state solutions. I see a one-state solution. From the river to the sea, everyone shall be free. I have the right to Jerusalem and to Haifa and to Yafa and to Akka. I have the right to be with my daughter, with Aram, and to take her to my childhood places and to sit there respectfully, with honoring and with my worth as one of this land. Same for Jewish, same for Christians. It is, our conflict is not on belonging and being together. The conflict was on the strategies that are being used. So the wish from the international world and people that do not choose or do not name us as a Muslim country, because this is exactly why there is all of this also conflict happening, because of all these judgments. Without people really knowing, without people really coming, without people, we are one of the most educated nations, Palestinians, even Gaza. We travel so much. We are one of the biggest travelers. We just don't show it the way Europeans and Americans does. And to me, this creates a lot of what is happening here. All these judgments that it's going to be an Islamic state. How could it be? It's not an Islamic only land. As Muslims, we believe in Judaism and in Jesus in order for us to be Muslims. So all of this is actually assumptions of media. It is not the truth, what people want here in the land. It's what the system wants you to believe. So you continue to also support the oppression system, believing that there are Muslims who wants to kill you just because they are Muslims, as if we are less humans than other people in the world who live 100 years without thinking of harming an ant. We too. We are exactly the same. Whether Muslims or Christians or Jewish, we know this land, we belong to this land, and we acknowledge this land is Jewish and Christians. And we acknowledge this is how we are fully free to be respected each to their religion beliefs and have a freedom to the land and its rivers and seas equally with justice, like it was before the Israeli occupation. Everybody lived together. There was no separation wall and no checkpoints and no, only around Bejala where Satyam is, there are like 17 yellow gates as if we are animals. So it's like, it's not, like there is a lot in the conversation and a lot of awareness that needs to come to people in order to really understand how the system and how media is playing a big part in separating us and in, belittling the Palestinian community as if it's only a Muslim. It's not. It's a Christian land as equal as it is to the other two. So, and we can live together just like you are doing it in Europe and in America. How can you live with a Buddhist above you and a Christian under you and a religious beside you? We can also do it. We wish to also do it. So
So just to add an interesting point to that, in the late Ottoman era, like the late 1800s, early 1900s, Palestinian society was actually one of the most secular in the entire Middle East. It was very much in response to Zionism that Islam started strengthening. The mosque was the only institution that was really readily available to hear and address people's concerns regarding Zionism. It also created a very strong distinction between who the Jews were and who the others were, which were non-Jews. And interestingly, this I only learned as of late. During the British Mandate era, there was many. You weren't free to travel everywhere through the land. You needed permits. The only people, or some of the only people that were free to travel were sheikhs and imams. So they had the ability to travel and spread the gospel, essentially. Now, I certainly hear if people say, okay, well, that was 100 years ago, but now there's way more Muslims. Who's to say it'll turn back? But I think it's still, and I hear that concern, but I think it is worth pointing out that historically Palestinian society was quite secular relative to the rest of the Middle East. So we have a question from, unless you want to add to that, we do have more questions coming in. So this is a question from Simfo. So you said you'd like one state for all people. And I've been for years saying from the river to the sea, all the people will be free. It's cool to hear someone else say that. But Simfo's asking, what about the fact that polls show that one state for equal rights to be one of the least popular resolutions amongst both Palestinians and Israelis, meaning there's not much support for this solution of people living on the land?
Of Palestinians and Israelis?
Yeah, that the polling shows that most Israelis...
I don't know of Palestinians that don't want a solution of one land for all. I haven't yet met them where we don't want to be in all of the land equally. From the Palestinian side. From the Israeli side, I don't know. Most of the Israelis I know, and I know a few hundreds, they want us to live together.
Yeah, it seems
it good for
the polling
industry and
the polling does pretty consistently show that it's not such a popular solution in both societies, but I guess that's Satyam has their work cut out for them. There's been many polls throughout the years on the solutions.
Again, like this is exactly like who is doing this poll where a Palestinian would say, no, I don't want to also go to Haifa and be in the sea. And I also only want the Dead Sea that I cannot be allowed to go on. Like it doesn't make sense that a human being, especially a Palestinian, also with the right of return that we're asking for, standing up for it, not giving up for it. It does not make sense that a Palestinian doesn't need a one-state solution. So to me, these resources are actually crucial when we talk about it. When you say, oh, most of the Palestinians don't, or it's not a popular, I can actually write it as a post on my media and get people to answer, Palestinians especially. Would you like to also have access to Haifa and Yafa and Nazareth, where you are refugee from? And I wonder if the poll will actually say, no, we don't want to be part of these areas. It doesn't make sense to our narrative, nor to our resistance of wanting to actually maintain our presence, not only in the West Bank. My family comes from Haifa. We want to go back to Haifa. We want to be in Haifa. My friends' family are from Haifa, from Yafa. They want to go. From Akka, they want to go. From Ajur, they want to go. From Lifta, we want to go. From Inkarib, we want to go. So no, it does not make sense that a Palestinian, a narrative from this land would say, I don't want to be in Haifa. Maybe this is the government. This is the systematic way of playing this enemy, separate them so they don't come together. But I don't think in any logic of our resistance and our right of return for the Palestinian after the Nakba 48, to say, oh no, we don't want all of Palestine. This is why we are not returning, my loved ones. We don't have an American and European dream. We have our dream of going back to our lands, and we shall be seen in it, and we shall be fought also for it, where you don't have to choose between a Palestinian and Israeli or Haifa or Yafa. You say, no, as humans, you can live together, and we will push for it because you all deserve to have it, because we are not less of a human than people in Germany who can live as a Jewish and a Christian and a Muslim and a Buddhist and a naked woman and the Haredi in the same streets. This is exactly what Satyam stands up. This is exactly our narrative as Palestinians. Unless you really, I don't know which these resources I will, as Mai Shahin, I'm also very much involved politically, and I'm a therapist, and I work in this field. I would more than be willing to find these resources that did this poll that says Palestinians don't want to fully be in justice and equally on their rights.
So I think there may be just a little misunderstanding here. I think that the majority of polls do show Palestinians want one state, but the way they describe it is not an equal state for both people. It's a Palestinian state. So a lot of Jews have a concern. They're like,
no,
wait,
because we don't have faith. We don't have faith that there can be a one state. We have been seen that we are lacking more lands each and every day. So according, it's like, yeah, just give us anything. It's like Oslo. What other option did we have? We have no other option. It's like, there is Oslo. You want Oslo? You don't want Oslo? There is only Oslo. So we went and we signed Oslo. Did we choose? Did we have the right of determination? No, we did not have. Europe determined for us, and America determined for us as Palestinians our destiny. And again, there is even in the nonviolent resistance, if you look at South Africa, their freedom, of course they got the free due to it, but was it the true freedom? No, it became a white land. They even lost their national songs. They lost their narrative of the land. It became a white free land. And for us Palestinians, we want the narrative of this land. The normal Jewish who are also Middle Eastern and from here, and Christians and Muslims, exactly like it was before. And the other thing I wish to share, and I wish for people to be aware of, even now today in Hebron, there is more than 200 Palestinian families who are actually Jewish. Also in Beit Omar, please write down the names so you don't forget the resources for the ones that wants to be assured of what I am saying. In Tel Ermeda, in Hebron, in Beit Omar, in East Jerusalem, there are hundreds and hundreds of Palestinian families who are originally actually the Jewish of also this land. So this land has always been, again, a Jewish, a Christian, and a Muslim. And this is our fight for it to be, again, a Jewish, a Christian, and a Muslim land where the three of us are in justice and freedom respected, not held, not with walls, not with the checkpoints, and not with gates, but the free equally to the rest of the world, equally to the rest. So we cannot only be the only example where we cannot live together and the rest of the world can. So it's like, this is really nonviolent resistance. This is really where we stand, not at people thinking I want to have half of my right as a human. I want my full right, my worth as a human, exactly equals to you, Adar, and to everyone else.
So I know we're touching on something that's like an issue of major concern for many Israelis. They express it often. They do believe that if there's one state, that they will not be equal. Do you can you say with confidence that you think one state would work and Jews living on the land would be protected in that state?
I have shared that part of, and we are not a minority. The ones I am connected to, the ones I am talking about, we are the majority. Again, my brother, my friends, Sabeh, Gonizel, Berman, and Abed, and Shahar, and Mahmoud, they are all married to Jewish Israelis, and their weddings were held in Isaiah and Bethany. They are integrated to the family more beautifully and generously, even more than myself at many moments. And again, this is the narrative and the culture of this land. I don't think if Jewish will wonder, of course, we are against the occupation. I cannot meet with the Jewish with a weapon between me and them and sit there thinking, oh yeah, I will take you. I want to meet them as only humans with nothing between us, and to live with them as humans with nothing between us but our humanity and respect to that humanity, whether I am a Muslim or a Christian or a Jewish, but not to judge me because I'm a Palestinian. Now I am a terrorist. Now I just want to kill. I am an animal. And then I will judge Jewish exactly the same. So it's like really getting out of this circle of the way we think and perceive each other. Because a lot of Palestinians will say Jewish just wants to kill us and they hate us and look what they are doing and the genocide, and they never wanted peace and they killed Rabin and they built the separation wall and they invented the checkpoints. So either we sit with this and I believe that Jewish wants to just kill me, or I will say no, they are humans. They are humans. They just want their safety and their belonging and freedom and their culture to be seen and respected. And I have more than the willingness as a human to, of course, want it to happen.
Sorry, I'm getting a mosquito. Mosquito or Mossad is interfering. We have a question from Dami17. Adar, so this is a question for you. If there's one state, do you have any thoughts of what it should be called? What should the flag be? Like the symbolism around the state? And also, you've become sidewards. Can you turn your camera back the other way?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can hold it because it needs to be charged.
Okay.
You know, as activists, a while ago, we started every time saying Israel, Palestine, or Palestine, Israel, and not saying one over the other. And at many times we say the Holy Lands. And I don't care. It can be Palestine, Israel, it can be the Holy Land. As long as we believe, as we live in justice and freedom, then I don't think the name will separate us. If we have a true intention and if we are led by true leaders that really sees both of us, then it can be called the Holy Land. You know, it's a beautiful connecting name that connects us to this land, but it's really holy, and what's happening here shall not be happening. We shall be healers to the world, messengers to the world, holders of these beautiful messages that landed, that teachers, what did they mean with it? And it's not terrorism, not to terrorize each other, not to separate, but to actually connect and to remember and to respect each other and the creation. That is, that we are blessed with.
Amen. So my suggestion would be we keep the name Palestine, but we change the spelling so it's like that, P-A-L-E Stein, S-T-E-I-N. So it still has some Jewish representation there. Palestine. Although I'm on the same page as you. I really don't care all much for the symbolism. I care more about the institutions that could protect the rights of the people. That I think is more important to me. Which I'm not. I will say, I'm not as convinced as you that that would work under one state, but I definitely appreciate your vision. I have some reservations. But you know, it's funny. Do people call you naive sometimes? Because I get called naive a lot.
Not to,
No,
not to my face.
not to your face. Okay.
Not to my face, at least.
Well, I was gonna say often
Yeah.
often the dreamers get called naive, but it's often because they're expressing a vision that is uncomfortable, and it's just not yet part of the collective consciousness. So it's seen as naive. And you know, there's a quote that's like, the difference between madness and brilliance is measured in success. So perhaps it's similar. The difference between being naive and visionary is if that vision ever manifests into something. Let's see. By the way, Luddy Van Beet, who asked the question about it being an Islamic State, responded saying, "Much respect to Mai. I totally agree with her, and thank you for the answer." So he appreciated your answer.
Thank you. Thank you, dear.
Cool. Let's see if we have any more questions. Mai, when's your cutoff? You have a cutoff at the start of at 9?
Yeah.
9. Okay. So that's only a few minutes left. So we'll stop with the questions. I guess I just want to give you the last few minutes to just leave us with whatever your thoughts are. What would you like to leave us with?
My wish and my prayer to all of us that we will really leave the circle of these systems and remember our essence, remember who we are, remember this humanity, and to respect each of all of our choices into this humanity as well. And again, it's a reminder not to, this movement, this hunger strike, Satyam, is really a voice to say you don't have to choose between Palestinians and Israelis, but to please choose both of us equally and with justice. So we don't repeat the oppressed and the oppressor. So we learn from history. So we sit and acknowledge what is happening, and we work on healing and freedom and being protectors of each other and to honor each other. And if we don't do it, then this system, this oppression system will continue to happen. And again, it's not only the Israeli occupation. The Israeli occupation is being supported by tax money of normal Americans and also Europeans. So we are all part of this oppression, of the starvation, the killing, the bombardment, the occupation, also part of the way it was dealt with the Jewish after the Holocaust and the trauma and reflection of the trauma that we are now witnessing. And it's an awakening call to say, how can we do it differently? Because if we don't do it differently and we don't find the strategies that will meet all of our needs, then we will continue to find this conflict. Because again, my worth and your worth are equal. And this is what I teach my daughter, and this is what my daughter will teach her daughter. And this is exactly what Jewish are teaching, and this is exactly what we shall be teaching our children, that they are worthy of all freedom and justice and dreams just equally to everyone else. Otherwise, then we should resist. We should stand up. We should fight for that worth and that right. And to me, it's a call to say, how can we now fight the right fight, the good fight toward each other, ending this oppression to everyone, and not arming an 18-year-old to kill, making him believe that it's a way for him to belong or to build a state, nor for the other side to be under siege and to believe also only through violence can we be free. But to show them that no, also through love and reconciliation and the international community and us as a human standing up, we can truly end it for all of us. So yeah, and thank you so much, Adar, for all you continue to do and for inviting me, and for the ones that are here and listening. I'm also here and listening, and for those who wish to know more or hear more, you are more than welcome to come. And yeah, we disagreeing on our opinions is not disagreeing on our humanity. At least the hope is not. So thank you, Adar. Thank you all.
Amen and inshallah. Mai, thank you so much. And shout out to Allah who actually connected us. I see she's here as well. So big shout out to Allah. And tomorrow I'm going to be joining you for your community call to speak to you all. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
And I will.
We're very much looking forward. Yeah.
I will also sign up for the next event because I'm very intrigued and would definitely want to connect more with you all. It's great what you're doing.
Thank you, dear. It's an honor to be with all of you. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you to everyone on the chat and writing and is listening. It's an honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mai. A real pleasure.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Adar. Thank you all.
Okay, with that, we will move this over to a community session. Hold on. Are you having trouble disconnecting? Okay, there we go. Okay. Cool. We could do, let's see what we're doing. 55. Okay, cool. We'll continue the stream for probably 20 to 30 more minutes in the community format, and then we'll shut down the stream and it'll be only community. So for those who want to join, you could find the link in the description. So it seems like there's a lot of chatter about the polling. How much we could trust the polls. So I'll share my thoughts on that, but I'm definitely happy to hear other opinions. I think that the reason I think polling does carry a fair bit of weight. It's some of the best data we have. I think we just need to keep in mind that public sentiment changes quickly with the change in environmental conditions. And we see that very clearly with the polling. You know, the polling from year to year, certainly decade to decade, changes drastically. So I think polling can certainly inform us on what's going on, give us a certain, let's say, a temperature check. And by the way, I think the Ask Project, Corey Gill-Schuster's interviews can provide something similar. But we should recognize that this is not all the public sentiment we see today can change relatively easily with some change on the ground, with a new leader that inspires hope, with a change in policy that improves the lives of people. So they're not static, they're not set in stone, and they're malleable if we change the environment. So that's my take on polls. They're definitely not meaningless. They do inform something, but you know, they're not gospel. Let's see, Justin, you shared this new flag, the falafel flag. I'm cool with that. Altoids, this was not asked. Levy, we're going to bring you on. I see you raised your hand. Invite sent, so you can come on. Altoid, so we didn't ask her exactly how will right of return work, but I get the sense that it would just be Jews and Palestinians, and perhaps anyone can immigrate to the land if they wish. Levy, what's up, man?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Yeah, so I thought she was very inspirational. I'm by chance reading a book about Gandhi and about his peaceful resistance and fast, his hunger strikes. So she fits very much into that same kind of figure, same kind of image that she portrayed. But I was getting, so when it is cut about the one state and how and who will prevent the violence against Israelis, my question is the opposite. If you're looking now at what's happening in the West Bank and all those farmers communities, Mustafa Yatta and Malik, like there is a big danger to the Palestinian communities, and that's why, like, the Canton idea, which you have spoken about previously, seems to make more sense. That there are like kind of gated communities, I guess, and each nationality will have their own kind of security apparatus that will guard their own communities. But it won't be like separate states. It will be free flow, like people can travel, but there will still be from each nationality a separate security service. I'm not.
Yeah. So
Does that make sense?
yeah, it definitely makes sense. I'm not sure how that would work in practice. So you're suggesting something like a federation solution, which is a solution I like. It's unclear though, because even in a federation, the cantons some cantons are gonna have both Jewish and Palestinian villages in one canton. You just cannot split it that way. We're too intertwined. And the concern of having smaller security groups for each community is it almost has like this militia. You almost have like these competing militias.
That's why I was thinking like more of a national, like it's not individual communities that have their own security service, but it's like the Palestinian nationality will have they will coordinate the different security for their communities, and Israel, of course, they should be they will work together with the counterparts. But
so
one is because when you see now, like the IDF is not, their priority is not to secure the Palestinians, which is why they're victim to the settler violence.
Right.
There's no consequence.
Right.
To settler violence, but because the security service of the PA has no power over the settlers. It's supposed to be the IDF's obligation, but they don't. They don't do anything about it.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying, like, each nationality has their own responsibility to secure their communities. Of course, in coordination, maybe that could be a better solution.
I'll tell you my concern with that is that it could create a situation where these separate forces start to see each other as adversaries,
as the enemy.
Yeah, it might make sense that it's just the security force has a lot of Israelis and Palestinians in it together, so it's a shared institution, and then you actually build a form of like kinship, like brotherhood through this national service that people are doing, and then if there's settler violence, it's a crew of both Jews and Palestinians showing up. And if there's a Palestinian being violent, again, Jews and Palestinians showing up. I think that would probably work better. That's my sense on it. But we definitely need to be thinking of these different creative solutions, for sure. For sure. And I think Rachel here mentioned the binational confederation. So this is a little bit different. This is more... the binational confederation would be more so similar to how like the European Union would be structured, but the federation would be more so like the different states that make up the United States. I've heard arguments for both. ChatGPT kind of convinced me on the confederation being better. It made a very compelling case on why that's the most pragmatic. But it doesn't solve all problems. There's some problems that are not solved by confederation that would be solved by federation, and vice versa. So, yeah,
I recently watched a documentary about Northern Ireland, and there's still violence between the Protestants and the Catholics, even more than 25 years after Good Friday. it's just, it doesn't give a lot of hope, but of course, equal rights should be the prerequisite for any solution. But security concerns shouldn't be ignored. That's for both peoples.
Right, exactly. I see hella confusing. The only solution, the perfect solution is ayahuasca to everybody. Yeah, I don't know if you're saying that seriously or not, but I definitely think that could assist in the solution if there's a mass usage of psychedelics.
Make you like
psychedelics in a ceremonial setting.
Don't you become?
What's that?
Don't people become paranoid from ayahuasca?
I mean, when you're on most psychedelics, there's a tendency to, I mean, it can go both ways. You can become fearless, but paranoia is definitely a side effect of psychedelics, but that doesn't last with you forever. Psychedelics have been said for thousands of years to have very powerful medicinal properties, and now it's finally being confirmed through studies. John Hopkins is studying it, MAPS is studying it. So it's currently one of the single best ways to heal trauma that we know of, and so it's starting to become part of Western medicine, which is pretty wild. Slowly but surely. So yeah, it could help. It could help. T. Bishop says, I've repeatedly offered to serve as a benevolent dictator over a single state solution, but they don't ever respond. Keep trying, man. You know, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But I think probably if we want to talk about a benevolent dictator, it should be AI. But benevolent AI dictatorship is probably the best form of governance if we could find a way to do that. Because humans suck at governing. AI, though, possible. Altoids, you're saying this is a wild take. Which one are we talking about? What's the wild take? Oh, the AI take. Well, I mean, it's terrifying, you know, because if it becomes malevolent, we're fucked. But I mean, currently you have malevolent leaders in places of the world that could weaponize this AI. So it's unclear that AI dictatorship would be more dangerous than human leaders that have the godlike powers of AI at their fingertips. And you know, I'm an eternal optimist, but we might be screwed, guys. Like it was a good run, you know. It was a good run, humanity. I mean, it is the kind of thing that the societal division we have, the international division we have, our inability to cooperate, does pose an existential threat because of AI. An AI arms race, you know, where different countries like China and the US are trying to gain an advantage over one another by weaponizing AI, might be game over. But we don't need to get into dark stuff. We're already talking about Israel, Palestine. Why add a whole new topic of darkness? Rachel says studies have shown that AI has been more effective than human beings in bringing reality to conspiracy theorists. Yeah, that's actually a study we read when we were researching head-on stuff. So that is true. That's also very, very well might be the solution to a lot of like this post-truth world we're living in, that it's very hard to know what's true and what's not true. If there's an AI that can help us make sense of misinformation and truth-telling, that could be huge. I do have a friend that's actively working on that now, so I hope he succeeds. And if he does, then we will integrate that into AI. That's funny. Thanks for Rachel. Thanks for sharing the source that ChatGPT helped you find. Let's see what we have here. So, Levy, are you cool if I tell people where you live? Just because I think it's cool. Like, it's a place we all hear about, but we don't know anybody who lives there ever. You're muted, so I don't know if you're saying anything. Or did you leave the computer for a little bit? Okay. Luxembourg is a good guess, but I won't give it away unless I get his consent. Not that I know his address, but, you know. Yeah, so can we get to the bottom of the polls things? Ahmed, you want to hop on and say why you don't think polls are good? Cool. Cool. Justin invited you on. Yeah, so Levy lives in The Hague, Netherlands. That's what I wanted to tell. So he gave permission. So he's just waiting for Netanyahu's arrival to visit for his court date, hopefully one day. Yeah, Justin, what's up, man?
I was going to say about the polls, I think what you said is very correct, because I've seen polls change over months. Like, if you would have asked me on October 7th, for example, or 6th, for example, what do you think of this? I would have said one answer. And if you would have asked me on October 23rd, 2003, it would have been totally different. So, and it's the same with the Corey Project. The issue with the Corey Project, the Ask Project, I should say, is that it's different when you go and ask somebody who lives, say, for example, in Ramallah or in, say, Hebron or Nablus, maybe a person who hasn't left, 10 kilometers away from his house in the last, 7 years, his attitude, his response, than, say, someone who lives in, bubbly Tel Aviv and things like this. So I think that polls have to take into consideration the several factors, including the personality of the people, the age of the people. I wish Corey would go and ask mothers, just go ask mothers certain questions. And I think a mother who has a child that's, say, a teenager who walks to school, who passes soldiers and checkpoints, you're going to find her answer is going to be a lot more different than, say, some 20-year-old or 23-year-old who's maybe a student who's having a hard time looking for a job, et cetera, or maybe money issues and things like that. So I think that that's the problem with a lot of these polls, is that it's all about timing, it's about circumstances, and especially in our region where things change. And so I think that makes all the difference in the world with these polls.
Yeah, I agree completely. I'm still trying to think of the best word to describe it. I stumbled on my words. I was saying we need to keep in mind that polls are not, and then eventually I said set in stone, but I feel like there's a better word to describe them. I don't know, maybe the audience can give me words. I often don't have the best word for things. Labial, is that your suggestion, Rachel? I've never even heard that word, but my first impression is it's not understood enough for me to use it. I try to use very simplistic language. Open to change readily. We should understand that polls are labile. How do you? Labile. I've literally never heard that word. So, but I want to use a word that people don't need to look up, So what's a synonym for labile? Honestly, with ChatGPT and LLMs, there's really no excuse to not become more articulate, It's like, we could improve our communication just by reviewing things. Labels, unstable, erratic, capricious, changeable, unstable, reactive, unsteady, fleeting, decomposable, volatile. Okay, I'll keep thinking about it. I appreciate the suggestion, Rachel, but it's a little too high class for my style. So if anybody else has suggestions, I'm open to them. Labile, huh? You learn something new every day. Ahmed, what's up, man?
I think the Discord UI is getting more discordial by the day. I didn't get the accept button until I switched to view and came back.
Oh, interesting. Okay, good to know. Well, hopefully soon we're doing everything on platform, and then the bugs are ours to deal with.
But yeah, the main point I'm trying to make is that the polls are really flawed at capturing complex ideas. And you know, I was trying to use the Corey project, the Ask project, as an example, in that he will frequently reframe questions because either the person receiving them completely misunderstands the intention of the question or the meaning of it. You know, the bulk of his interview is trying to reframe the question until he finds a framing that he thinks the person fully understood. And then he will ask follow-ups to be like, is that really what you believe? What about under these conditions? And these are things that polls just cannot capture, or it's very hard for them to capture. So I think they're useful for very basic things like, who are you voting for tomorrow? But to try to understand people's, feelings about something as complex as, the two-state solution, or what kind of relationship they want to have with Israelis, or it's they're data points, but in addition to everything you said about them being very ephemeral and changing, they're also just not sophisticated or good at capturing complex ideas. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think you explained it well. They give us some sense of reality, but not the full sense. And then there's, when it comes to the Ask project, and Justin, this is actually a question I have for you. But I think that I could see a bias in both directions for how Palestinians respond. First of all, I know many Palestinians don't want to answer political questions for fear of backlash. And this backlash could come from their community, from the PA, or from Israel. Now, the fear of both the PA and Israel seems to create two, well, the backlash from the PA and maybe one's community seems to be different from the backlash that would happen from Israel, and they're putting competing pressures, right? So if somebody comes on and says something super hawkish, they might be scared there'll be repercussions from Israel. But if they say something too lovey-dovey, peace-oriented, then there might be backlash from the PA or their community. What of these pressures do you think is more powerful, and how do you think this is skewing the responses? I brought you back on.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And I'm going to tell you that it depends on who you are and what's your status. So for example, if you're a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship, you're going to be more concerned about, like if you're a teacher or a professor, you're going to be more concerned about the Israeli side because it could cost you your job, you could serve jail time, it could bring about the Shabak, it can do all that. Now, if you're an East Jerusalem resident, you're going to be more concerned about Israel. You don't really care about the Palestinian Authority because East Jerusalem residents, they don't, their government, they basically live under Israel. They're basically Palestinians that live in Israel, but have a different status that's not citizenship. But they don't have security in a sense that their residency can be revoked. And I would put myself in that classification because I try to minimize and do a lot of stuff because my fear is that I'm more concerned about Israel. I'm not necessarily concerned about the Palestinian Authority. But then the people who live in the West Bank, definitely I think they can. But I have to say that people who live in the West Bank tend to be more outspoken than people who live in Jerusalem, and even so in the 48 territories. And that is because Israel is a much more aggressive when it comes after people. And I want to say the Palestinian Authority does come after people. But and I'm being fair, me, I would call it out for what it is. I would say that I don't have a problem saying that, a Palestinian Authority is corrupt or an Arab government is corrupt. There's no issue with me with that. But for us, I think Israel is far more outweighs the oppression when it comes to the backlash on people speaking out. And just to give you an example, like I have, half my family is West Bank, half is Jerusalem. Many of my relatives, when they travel, they have to go. They're a West Bank Palestinian Authority. They're, you know, extremely vocal and stuff like that. And where do they face the problem most of the time is like when they go to Jordan, because they have to go through Jordan when they want to travel out the country. And as soon as they get to the border, Israel turns them back. It says, we've noticed that there's some contents that you said that we find inappropriate. So the reaches of the Israeli government doesn't just hit the citizens or the residents of Jerusalem. It affects the people even in the West Bank, because like one of my cousins, for example, was supposed to go study abroad. And he got to the border and they said, no, we're not approving you leaving the country. So, you know, so I definitely feel that the Israeli part is much more the reason why people will not tend to be more scared.
Interesting. So you would say that people are maybe going to be more hawkish if they knew there would be no repercussions, essentially, right?
I wouldn't necessarily say hawkish, but I think that you would get a lot more people speaking up. I think that you would get a lot more people expressing their views. I do think that the people who, for example, may talk to Israelis, the people who may work with groups that are talking about coexistence, it's not because they're not hawkish. It's because that they're not trusting. Like, you know, when you work with certain groups, you have to be careful, because you could be lured to something that's done on purpose to normalize something. Like, for example, there's certain elements of Roots. You know that I worked with Roots, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, like Rav Hanan is a great guy. I think he's 100% sincere. But there's a lot of people in his organizations who are not. They're pro-war. They support a lot of things that I just feel very, very, you know, for example, there's one, her name is, I can't remember her name. Her last name is Sachs. Natalie Sachs. I don't know if you've met her. She's from Ariel.
No, I don't.
She's one of the leaders there. I don't like her. I really, really can't stand her, because she's, in addition to Roots, she's involved in a lot of other, like Habaita. And Habaita people, I don't like those people. They make me sick. And their motivations when they reach out to Palestinians is, you know who Habaita is, right?
Inon, the founder's a friend. It's funny. We should get him on here for a chat.
Anon. Anon. I've heard Anon speak a few times, and he's actually one of the better ones, to be honest with you. I mean, you got like Rudy Rochman and Denzig and these guys. They do some good stuff. Like when, you know, I respected Denzig on Jerusalem Day when he was like, I saw him get in between settler mobs, you know, extremist mobs and Palestinians. I saw him stand right in the middle of them, and I respect that. But another time, I don't think their version of what they want for Palestinians and what we want for ourselves, it really, really comes in line. It's like, you know.
Yeah, it's kind of like maybe it's more like a compassionate apartheid would be their approach.
Yeah. And your friend, what's his name? Yehuda Cohen. I think he's kind of.
So I would actually say Inon is comfortably in that camp as well. You know. He's but we should try to get him in for a conversation here. Fam is asking, when Palestinians get asked if they want one state, do they think that they would still be under occupation or military rule? Never thought about that. I imagine they believe that that would be an end to it, right?
Are you asking me, or?
Yeah. I mean, anyone can respond, but you being the Palestinian here,
I mean, I think when Palestinians talk about a one state, most of them envision. And here's the thing, I know like Noam is going to have a problem with this, is he's going to say, oh, you're going to turn us into dhimmis and charge us jizya and all this other bullshit. Okay, but the thing is that, and he was making those comments earlier, that's what I'm saying is, but I think that, I was listening to a video that SRG sent you earlier about the guy, I can't remember his name, it was the YouTube video he sent you earlier, and it was actually a really good video. I thought it was going to be a hospital video, but he talked about the different mindsets of both Palestinians and Israelis and how both are wrong about historical and history and stuff like that. And he said that, you know, we were second-class citizens under the Ottoman Empire. Well, I have news for you. We were second-class citizens under the Ottoman Empire too. The Turks never treated us as equal citizens. You know, the institutions and buildings and bridges that you saw in Istanbul didn't happen in Ottoman Empire, in Ottoman Palestine. So I think that when Palestinians talk about one state, for them it is a state of Palestine the way it was, and that included Jews.
including
Palestinian
Jews.
movement, even the most extreme, that ever said that Jews are not a part of our country, Jews are not a part of our land. And by the way, May, this the great woman that was here today, was so representative of Palestinian society, because here she is, from a Muslim family. She lives in Jerusalem, very outspoken, very like determined, and doesn't back down from equality, doesn't back down from dignity. And she flashed out the tattoos and stuff. And where I come from a much more conservative family, but she kind of and she looks like the lady who lives downstairs from me, by the way, which is amazing. And I'm like, but here's the thing. This is a lady that's lived in my building even before I was born. And we get along, because that's the beauty of Palestinian society, is that we have that diversity. You can have May, and you can have people like from my family, which are a little bit more conservative. And again, I'm not from an extremely conservative family, but much more culturally conservative. And that's the beauty of our society. And it includes people, not just Jews, but Christians, and as well as people who are secularist and, Shomranim and this. And that's when we say one state, that's what we mean. Are there some people who want to take it further? Yes. But most Palestinians that I've met, this is what one state means: a state for all.
Okay.
Yeah, Altoids, feel free to chime in.
A state for all, I see. So when the state was for all during the Mandate of Palestine, and the Jews were still a very small minority, why then it caused so many issues that it provoked people to go to fight with each other? And mind that in the Mandate of Palestine, the mandate that the British had, the Jews were not taking people's lands, they were not taking people's houses. They were buying them legally, and they were stopped at the end of the 1920s, in the beginning of the 1930s, or mid-1930s. So why then there's this, the idea of the one state, but we already had a one state. The one state was under the British mandate, and there was a lot of problems between the two groups. If you go to Jaffa, for example, in 1921, because a lot of people talk about Hebron, but Hebron is whatever. In Jaffa in 1921, the chief rabbi of Jaffa had to intervene with the between the Jewish community that was being attacked in the riots of 1921 by the local Arab population. So, and the chief rabbi, which is a born Yerushalmi Sephardic Jew, was supporting the Jewish community there. Some of them who were new immigrants, and some of them who were long time people who were living there, Yerushalmi population. So why then, when it was a one-state solution, there still was not comfortable? They still didn't want the Jews to have the same rights.
So Adar, he's asking me, so you want me to respond?
Yeah.
Anyone can respond.
Okay. So I'll tell you why. The difference was the 1920s. Remember, you had the Balfour Declaration that had said that they're going to support a homeland for the Jewish people. You had a massive amount, you had a Zionist movement that was talking about displacing Palestinians and bringing in European Jews to displace them. So it wasn't necessarily against a Palestine that was Jewish free or didn't want to give rights to its Jewish residents. It was about Palestine losing control to a basic colonial movement. And remember, we're at the height of colonialism in the Middle East back then. Okay, when the British were coming in, the British, when did they colonize Palestine? 1917. So we're talking just less than a decade later, a massive amount of migrants coming, settling it with basically permission from the colonizing power to come in and establish a nation, a homeland for the Jews. So I think it's unfair to judge Palestinians for how they reacted to that. I don't know no other country in the world or people in the world who would have reacted differently under those same situations. So if you're telling me that one day the Jews that were living there for thousands of years, along with the Palestinians, and the Palestinians suddenly turned against them, I don't see how you can make that determination or judgment. But if you want to take in the other situation and the other circumstances that were happening in Palestine at that time, then you can understand why things happened the way they did.
I will understand your point about the immigrants, but let's take in consideration the Hebron massacre in 1929, for example. A lot of people love bringing up.
Yeah, okay.
And I will bring it up just for one specific example.
How many people died in Hebron? How many people died in Hebron?
Before, I know what you're going to say, but let me make this point. It's not about what you're thinking. In 1929, the Hebron Jews were there, right? And the Hebron was an ancient community that has been there for a long time. I believe the only time they were displaced from the Hebron was during the Crusades. But besides that, there was always a Jewish presence there.
But what I'm trying to say is the Hebron massacre happened because there was agitation by Zionists. And even the chief rabbi of Hebron, even the chief rabbi of Hebron was complaining about the way the Zionists were coming in and setting up securities and agitating the situation. And the fact is, even despite all that,
in which city?
In Hebron. And then,
So
and then you
and
then also you have to say there were more Jews protected in Palestinian homes than there were that were massacred by 4 times.
Okay, so, I'm not saying that.
You're asking me.
I'm not. Wait, I haven't even made my point, but I'm not saying the Palestinians of Hebron were evil. Like, so sometimes that's what is said when they bring up this Hebron case. What I'm trying to say about the Hebron case is that
you're coming to
the Jews of Hebron were not in Jaffa. They were not in Jerusalem. They were not in Tel Aviv. They were in an area that was at the moment very small amount of Jews. To this day, still, there's not that many Jews in comparison to the Arabs that live there. So why the massacre happened here and it didn't happen in Tel Aviv?
Why did the massacres happen in Tantura? Why did the massacres happen in Deir Yassin? This was during the time because of the stuff that was going on.
Before we go into the 1947 war, because we can talk about massacres that happened in 1947 on both sides. But
what I'm saying is that
in 1929,
again, I'm going to refer to my answer again.
Because the Jews didn't have military protection.
Wait, guys, we're getting to the point where you're both talking over each other. So let's just be mindful and give everyone the opportunity to speak. So Altarj, make your point, and then Justin, we'll give it over to you.
Thank you. So my point is that the Jews in Hebron didn't have protection in contrast to the ones in Jerusalem or the ones in Tel Aviv, because it was a very small community. And therefore, many of the people there, first, they didn't think that their neighbors or people who came from the countryside will come to the city and attack them. And secondly, majority of them were not affiliated to the Zionist movement because there were people who were there before the Zionist movement. Majority of them were, the 90% of them were religious people. It was some people were Ashkenazi, and the majority were Sephardic. And they did not expect this to happen. Otherwise, they would have security forces and protection, like all other Jewish communities around the country at the time, or that were forming during this time. So this is under the one-state solution, that you have secular security that will only intervene, God knows for what reason. That's the issue with it. It's the same that happened in Yugoslavia. It's not the question that there is a national military. It's the question of, will the national military intervene in ethnic problems between groups? Or will the national military side with one of the groups?
So here's the thing. I'm going to go back to the 1929s, the 1920s. Unfortunately, Zionism polluted the natural order that had existed for centuries. And the other thing is, I don't know what your solution is. Is your solution is to do transfer of populations? You know, it's like the Jews want to have a majority state, but they're a small population. So the question is that if you're going to say, okay, we need to have a majority and we need to protect ourselves and we need an army, that's what you've been doing. And I don't know if it's really gotten you anywhere in the last 80 years. I mean, you have a state right now. You might say it's a great state. We're happy. But hey, every few years, you guys have these wars and you guys are occupying and now committing, genocide. And people can say it's not genocide, whatever. Okay.
It's not genocide.
Transfer. Okay, whatever. Okay, it's not, whatever. Okay. Yeah, it's something.
Yeah, critical theory. We love socialism.
If you think this works out for you, then do it for the next 200 years. I mean, hell, this is the consequences of what you're going to face. And tomorrow it'll be something bigger that is going to hit you than October 7th. That's it. Continue.
Okay. I know I get a critical theory. They love using words for meaning to gather support. Everybody knows this. Socialism is great at making words trigger people. But I'm not going to budge in and say, everything is a genocide now. No, sorry.
That's actually an interesting, I actually had a little tweet fight about that this week. I don't think it's as simple as saying if you call it genocide. That I don't think that's a product of critical theory. I think that if you look at how genocide is defined legally, it's defined quite narrowly, and it's hard to prove genocide in the court of law because proving intent is difficult, right? How do you prove intent? You need to find some like leaked wiring saying, oh, we're going to intentionally kill all these civilians, or maybe enough whistleblowers saying that. That's very hard to find. So academics don't require that level of proving intent. They look more so at the actions and judge it based on other things. There's a difference between how we judge something in the court of law and how it's judged in the court of public opinion. And then colloquially, I think the term genocide is used even more broadly to say an instance of group violence that is indefensible and absolutely horrific. And no, it's not just a war, it's a genocide. So I think people are trying to describe the reality they're seeing with the terms we have available to them. I don't know if we could just say it's critical theory. I think it's good that we have harsh language to describe harsh actions. Now, if you want to argue we shouldn't define it more broadly, I'm happy to hear that case, but because we don't have better words to describe a mass atrocity, unless you want to say mass atrocity like I like to describe it, I'm perfectly okay with people calling it genocide. And if you do look at the definition, it falls neatly into the definition. It's just very hard to prove intent. And a genocide does not mean trying to exterminate an entire population. That's a misconception. So I think a lot of the debate also.
What does it mean then?
We could open the definition, but but one of the lines is destroying a group in whole or in part. So it doesn't need to be the destruction of the whole group. Now, how do you define in part? There's something subjective about that. So the way it's often defined is in part is a significant part of the population, enough to fundamentally change the nature of the population. So when you look at Israel's conduct in Gaza, the systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure, the way of life for Gazans, whether it's destroying their ability to have fresh water, water wells, water desalination, pipelines, power grids, cropland, hospitals, and other medical infrastructure. There's been civilian homes, right? There's just been a systematic destruction of civilian infrastructure. And people say, well, why would Israel do that, right? Are they just doing it because they're evil? No, I think I think there's often incentives. So there's two very clear reasons why Israel would want to harm civilians. Interesting that we're getting some balloons. Okay, I guess when you do that, do you guys see that? That was kind of cool. There's two strong motivations for Israel to harm civilians. One is this idea that if you inflict enough pain on the civilian population, hopefully it'll cause Hamas to surrender. To defeat Hamas militarily is not something Israel is willing to take on. It's just we're too risk averse. We don't want to lose that number of soldiers. It's why we've been doing this for 2 years and we only control 60 to 70% of Gaza. Holding 100% of Gaza is very bloody. So we're not doing that. So if you inflict enough suffering on the civilian population, maybe Hamas will surrender. That's one. The second, which is now Netanyahu's publicly stated goal, he said he liked Trump's relocation plan. If your goal is to relocate a population, the single best way to get them to do that is to make Gaza unlivable and make their lives miserable. So there's a clear incentive and motivation for Israel to be harming civilians. So I don't think calling it genocide is not far-fetched, crazy terminology. Yeah, we could have a debate. Does this constitute genocide, or is it just the massive amounts of war crimes? But it's not like that's a crazy term. It fits. It fits in many regards.
It doesn't really, because the 7th of October fits much more neatly into the definition of genocide, and it's not defined as a genocide. So if you're saying that it's a genocide, then you're being hypocritical.
Wait, no, because you could say you think October 7th should also be a genocide, but you can't say because they're not calling October 7th a genocide, that means that what Israel's doing is a genocide. That's not how definitions are defined. You can make the claim either that both are genocide or that they're being hypocritical. I hear those are both arguments, but the fact that many people or most people don't consider October 7th a genocide doesn't mean Israel's response isn't.
No, but it means that if those people call Gaza a genocide, then they're being dishonest or biased or racist or objective.
I think it probably has something to do, and we've spoken about it, I think it's probably connected to the scale of October 7th.
Which is not part of the definition.
Well, it is actually in whole or in part. And the way they define in part is a significant part of the population. So there's a level of subjectivity here, right? Okay, so if you want to say October 7th killed a significant enough part of the population to be a genocide, go for it. You'll need to convince others that's a good definition, but we can't say scale isn't connected. It is connected. It's part of the definition.
It's not part of the definition. Subjective interpretation of the definition.
No, in whole or in part. Wait, in whole or in part?
Okay, so and the 1,000 people killed in the 7th of October were also in whole or in part Israeli society.
Correct. So you can determine that you think that was a significant enough part to determine this is a genocide, and then people will decide if they will take you seriously. You have the right to do that. I'm not saying you don't, but I think most people, including scholars on genocide, some of whom are Jewish, don't see that as a significant enough part of the population. They would consider it a massacre. But if you want to call it a genocide, go for it. But people not describing October 7th as a genocide doesn't speak to whether Israel's response is a genocide or not.
No, but it speaks to the intentions of the people that are describing or not describing it as a genocide.
Right. Well, but you need to.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But so I would say they would say the scale matters, and you say the scale doesn't matter, and therefore they're hypocrites. I'm not sure. I would think would need to convince them that the scale doesn't matter. Serge, I saw you want to hop in.
Well,
and you could go to other genocides and say, I don't know, the genocides in World War II, there was much bigger parts of the population. So in that scale, it's not a genocide. So if you're going by objective interpretations, then you need to decide.
I'm not sure there's an objective interpretation here, but I do want to give it over to Serge.
Well, I just wanted to say that I'm a little confused by what you're saying, because you were saying that in the Genocide Convention, it's in whole or in part, but then you also said in whole or a significant part. But I don't think that's actually said in.
No. Again, I'm not saying. I'm saying if you look at how scholars and human rights organizations define, and I imagine the courts as well, but we could look into this. You need to define in part, because if not, killing one person is a genocide. So in part needs to mean something more than just one person. So they do have a way to determine what in part means. The definition itself does not say in whole or a significant part, but they do need to define that somehow. And when you look at how it's being defined by scholars and human rights organizations, and let's look how the courts determine the in part, because I think that's important as well. They describe it as a significant enough part of the population to change the nature of the society. So something along those lines. That's how it's defined.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Also, if you look at where it happened in that area in Israel, close to the Gaza border, it is a much more significant part of the population. And also here, when you're talking about Gaza, you're separating Gaza from the rest of the Palestinians. So you're not taking the whole Palestinian people for when you're talking about the scale of the genocide.
Yeah, it's not, you don't need to, yeah, real quick, you don't need to look at all the Palestinians, including West Bank and diaspora. There's a society that exists in Gaza that is separate to the society that exists in the West Bank, and that's separate from the diaspora, which is a collection of different societies. So that's just like trying to win on a semantic. That's not how it's looked at.
So you don't need to look at the whole population of Israel to I think whether October 7th was a genocide just on scale.
You
Just on the
would need
population
to
of that area.
you would need to look at Israeli society. If you want to say we should just need to look at the society of the kibbutzim, sure. Again, but no, you're trying to like win on a semantic or a technicality. You're welcome to do this. I'm not going to police your language. I'm just going to tell you this isn't. You're not going to compel people. So these aren't compelling arguments. One is Israel killing 4 to 5% of entire population, and the other is killing 0.0001 or whatever. So it's like we're just worlds apart on scale. It's just not even the same ball game. So you could call it a genocide. People do call October 7th a genocide, but don't expect, like, if somebody says, I don't agree that's a genocide, but I consider Israel's response to be a genocide, that's not hypocritical. That's not unfair of them to do. They have a right to consider one a genocide and the other not. You could try to convince them, but I don't think it's right to say they're just being hypocritical.
Well,
Also-
I think they have the right to say that they're being hypocritical.
Can you guys hear me?
Legality
Yeah.
is all semantics.
Yeah, but Omar, Al, I know Omar wanted to hop in, so we'll give it to Omar and then we'll give it over to you.
Okay. Just as someone who sees what's currently happening in Gaza as a genocide, but October 7th wasn't. Before I go into why, I think Justin mentioned it perfectly in relation to what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in the West Bank. He said what's happening in the West Bank is ethnic cleansing, and what's happening in Gaza is a genocide. And because you do not have the mass murders on a wide scale happening in the West Bank as well. Can you guys hear me? Or are you frozen for me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, so this is about the Palestinian population, and also you cannot say the same thing about Israel, because Israel isn't divided by many borders from Gaza to East Jerusalem to the wall to the West Bank to even within the West Bank the divides separating the population. But this is why you can say yes, the Gazan Palestinians are having a genocide committed against, while the West Bank aren't. But in Israel, it's a totally different argument. That's one thing. Hella was also arguing something in the chat, which is the feasibility. The IDF actually does have the power to enact a genocide, which is it is currently doing, but you cannot say the same thing about Hamas. Hamas will never be able, or would have never been able, to attack Israel as a whole and drive the Israeli people outside of Israel or Palestine using power. All they wanted was to achieve a war goal, which is to take in hostages, achieve having the public eye looking upon Israel, looking upon Palestine, and having people collaborate with them to against Israel in the war. So it was more of a war goal, not a genocidal intent and genocidal goal. So it's a totally different thing. Aside from what's currently happening with the IDF, they literally explicitly want to either kill the Gazans, so there is no Gazan on any Gazan land, or just displace the Gazan, which is ethnic cleansing. So you can say ethnic cleansing, you can say genocide, but it's definitely something of the two, and it's definitely a war crime. So I'm not here arguing the literal term. I'm arguing that the action from the scalability and from the intent is totally different, and you can't really equate October 7th to what's from October 8th to July 1st, 2025.
Can you guys hear me?
Thanks, Omar. Yeah, Al, all you.
Sorry, I'm driving in the mountains, so it's a little glitchy. I was going to say I disagree with Omar. He says Hamas's intent was not genocide. I mean, if they killed 1,200 people in less than a day, and the only reason they stopped is because the army came in. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, let's say the army wasn't able to come in for 2 or 3 days. Are you saying that they would have stopped their killing spree? I mean, I think they would have continued until they would have been stopped. So I definitely think their intent was genocidal.
So this is what I'm saying. So there's a difference between attacking in their eyes, and in my eyes, and occupying an army and trying to push this occupying army out of the land and trying to gain back your land, and actually trying to persecute people, kill them, and commit genocide against them. So the Native Americans back then were fighting what I consider right now the Americans back then with the Brits, and they were trying to drive them out of the land. This wouldn't be considered genocide. But if the Native Americans want to kill every single Brit or every single American on American land, then this is genocide. So Hamas doesn't want to kill every single Jew or every single Israeli on Palestinian land. They want to regain their land back. And this is their intent, or what I believe to be their intent, or at least this is my intent. So you cannot say I have genocidal intent because I want the Palestinian people to regain back their land. But if the Palestinian people or I want every single Jew killed on this land, or every single Israeli even killed on this land, then you can call it a genocide. I agree with you, but this is not what we want. It's not Hamas wants.
Officially what Hamas wants. The fact that they took it out a couple of years ago from the charter doesn't mean that they don't want it, and it was there before. So that's literally what they want.
So we can now go over what Hamas did, what Hamas wants, and this whole thing. We can't really know unless we have a Hamas person in hiding here. But all we can know is we can see their interviews, we can see the political office in Qatar and what they said. And what they said is more aligned with what I'm saying than what you're saying, Noah. But this is all I'm gonna say.
No, in the interviews they also said it, and they said that every Israeli is a settler soldier, even a baby.
Yes, it is. Yes, they are different. Every Israeli that is sitting on in a Palestinian home is a settler.
The soldier?
But that doesn't mean
they said settler soldier.
That's what I'm saying.
It is interesting how like
I don't know about sport.
It's
So do you think that sorry, I just want to clarify something that Omar just said, because does that mean that the border from 1948 to 1967, that is, what UN sees as the territory of Israel, do you think that all Israelis who live there are settlers? Omar?
So we can argue UN definitions all day long.
I don't care about UN. I want your definition. I want to know what you think.
I'll tell you. So we can argue history and say why this, why that. I just like I have a choice to make, and this is if you can actually like get the Palestinians.
Yes. Okay, just say yes, because that's what you're saying.
I would love to answer that question.
Let me continue.
Go ahead, Omar.
You asked me a question. I want to continue. So if you can get, the thing is, you guys like to argue over what do you believe, which is the right border. Okay, give the Palestinians the 1967 borders and see how these ideas of the 1948 would just disappear. Give the Palestinians peace. Give the Palestinians what they deserve. Give them at least some sort of modicum of humanity, and then we wouldn't be arguing over the 1948. But what I personally believe, yes, 100%, they deserve all the land back. 1948, and the Jews can take back whatever they own.
Why didn't Egypt, your country, why didn't they give them Gaza, and why didn't they recognize a Palestinian state? Why didn't Jordan occupy the West Bank and didn't grant the Palestinians a state?
What do you mean they didn't give back? They didn't give them back Gaza? I don't understand.
1948, the land was partitioned. Jordan was annexed by the West. Jordan annexed the West Bank, and Egypt annexed the Gaza Strip, and they didn't recognize the Palestinian state then.
No, okay? They did. They did this to not have another genocide committed against them. If what you're saying is true, and Egypt was occupying
it is true.
Gaza,
what I'm saying is true. It is true.
Let me continue. Don't start interrupting me. If you want to push your own narrative and rhetoric, you can do this in front of your wall or in front of your mirror. If you're gonna ask a question, then let me answer, or don't ask it in the first place. So if you're gonna say that Egypt was occupying Gaza, the same thing Israel is occupying Palestine, and Jordan was occupying the West Bank, the same thing that Israel is occupying Palestine, then why did they give the land back?
I'm sorry?
Then why did they give the land back? Why is there currently a Gaza that's considered Palestine and not considered Egyptian?
It did, and Egypt rejected it in 1967.
The problem with these questions, SRJ, the problem with these questions is you're doing what Altoid is doing. You're applying 2025 to like this. Now you remember 1960s, when Egypt took control, the Palestinian people, 80% of Gaza were refugees. And it could have been simple to say, oh, they could have made a Palestinian state, but you can't understand what happened to Palestinians. It's like it took Jews like a decade or so to get their act together after the Holocaust and recover. And it's, you guys were able to do it, but it wasn't necessarily true. Palestinian leadership was decimated from the 30s to the 40s. And in addition to that, we had issues with Jordan trying to establish an empire and carving out for itself. And in fact, Egypt did actually try to support a Palestinian sort of nation that was going to start from Gaza. But the goal was for 80% of those people who had been refugees was to return home. So it wasn't necessarily thought of in that mindset that create a Palestinian land here. We already had a Palestinian government that was looking set up that actually Egypt did, I think their interest was, because they were worried about Jordan, but they actually did support a Palestinian government, sovereignty in Gaza, that was later to lead the liberation of all the land. So, when you apply these 2025 questions to 1960 or 1950s, you're not doing yourself a good favor. And I want to answer your questions about, do I consider them settlers that live in the 48 territories? So in 1993, I want to say 1988, when Yasser Arafat at the PNC summit in Algiers recognized Israel's right to exist and a two-state solution, Palestine and the 1967 territories, we accepted this. And I turned to all the Arabs who came here and said, Israel doesn't deserve the right to exist. And I said to them, hey, the PLO there is a representative of the Palestinian people, and we have recognized that the 1967 borders and stuff. But now, and Altoid and all this stuff that was saying earlier and stuff like that, it is not us who turned down the two-state solution. The two-state solution is turned because now we're about to approach 1 million Jews who live in the territories that were supposed to be given for Palestinians to form a state. Okay, so now I'm questioning that if your side hasn't agreed to the Oslo agreement, hasn't come through the Oslo agreement, and our state has basically not come into existence, then why should I now recognize that Jews who live in Tel Aviv and Haifa are no longer settlers? We accepted 1967. We said, okay, two states, recognize Israel. But, it's like, no. But meanwhile, we have transplants of hundreds of thousands of Jews moving into what was supposed to be our future state. So why should we accept that you have a right, that you are no longer a settler? As far as I'm concerned, until we don't have a definite state with our rights, if the two-state solution is, then guess what? You are a settler, no matter where you are, because you have not made an agreement. And once we have an agreement and the borders are drawn, and then you say, and Al, when you talked about what Hamas did, there is no evidence that Hamas said to go kill children. I think it was Noam or Al, I forgot, one of the guys. Okay, there's no evidence to say that Hamas were ordered to go kill children and children were targets and legitimate. That's absolutely wrong. In fact, there's the opposite. And you can come up with all these made up stories and stuff like that. That's fine. But the fact is that the SRG, you shared a video to Adar, which I thought was a great video. I thought it was going to be a bullshit Hasbara video, but to tell you the truth, the guy was actually like 90% on point. And he said something very important. He said that 700 soldiers on October 7th, there were 700 soldiers in charge of protecting the border of 56 kilometers. So if you want to know why so many people were hurt on October 7th, it wasn't because Hamas is genocidal. It's because your defenses were down. 700 soldiers. You have more soldiers protecting little, stupid, crazy extremist settlers that are going around burning Palestinian towns, more of them protecting those terrorists than you do your border with Gaza. Okay? October 7th was your fault, your people's fault, because you guys rather protect thug terrorist settlers than your own fucking borders. Okay, so think about that.
Yeah, and the genocide is Gaza is your people's fault because you let Hamas agitate Israel to do it.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. And you guys, you know what? To tell you the truth, if you guys protect your borders instead of your settlers, then maybe your people wouldn't have died.
If Hamas were not genocide, then the people would just be locked in their houses.
No, let me tell you something. You said something interesting. You said, well, not all the Palestinians are in Gaza. So therefore, the Holocaust wasn't a genocide because not all Jews lived in Europe.
What?
There were Jews living in South America. There were Jews living in America. So therefore, by your definition, the Holocaust wasn't. Do you see why your words are dangerous? For your own sake, they're dangerous because your interpretation. So therefore, there was no Holocaust in Europe. There was no genocide. And I'll tell you why there was no genocide, because a lot of Jews lived in America. So therefore, it wasn't a genocide. That's your definition, buddy.
It was a genocide of the
So
European Jews.
So then can I say it's a genocide of the Gazan Palestinians? So can I change my, okay, it's a genocide of the Gazan Palestinians?
Yes, and on the 7th of October was a genocide of the southern border.
That's fine, call it a genocide, call it a genocide, because if October 7th was a genocide, then what's happening in Gaza right now is a Holocaust times 10, okay?
And see, that's
Cool.
what
I
the
think
problem is calling it a genocide.
I think we found common ground.
Trying to equate it with the Holocaust in Europe.
This genocide
and then
thing
dismissing violence against.
It's all about critical theory. You see, they use this language to equate it to the Holocaust, to legitimize the Holocaust for when they wanted to kill over, and they always is in their wet dreams when they take over that they are going to do the exact same thing to Jews in Israel that they happened in the Holocaust. Because sorry, the Holocaust was not a genocide. Okay, sorry, it's just a thing that happened in industrialized Europe. Okay, well then, if you start phrasing things however you want, two people got killed yesterday in having a trans surgery in America. That's a trans genocide, guys, because the conservative Americans, they're trying to genocide the trans people. Like Adar might say no, the language doesn't matter. There's no critical theory.
How many people? How many people? How many people? How many people?
Really impossible, because it could be anything from 1 person to 10,000 to 1 million, because it's in part. And sorry, I know Adar, he reaffirmed and added new stuff into the definition by saying it has to be a massive, like a amount that is enough for it to be counted as a genocide. But it's okay. He can use his definitions. He can make new definitions. The director of the genocide studies of the United Nations was literally expelled from their position because she opposed the definition that all these activists, so-called quote-unquote scholars, were taking in the United Nations. And that is the reason why the United Nations, because they're taking these activists, leftist positions, is going to die as an organization because they lost all their
Altoids. Altoids, though, you need to understand. I made the case based on the definition and the consensus and how words have meaning, and your only response is it must be critical race theory. That's just not a legitimate rebuttal. I'm sorry.
It's a critical race theory. I say critical theory from the Frankfurt.
Sorry. You're right. But again, that's not an argument. That's just a deflection. You're saying
it's not
wait, hold on. Imagine somebody makes an argument and someone's response is, no, that's just Hasbara. You would say, tell me why it's wrong. You're not saying why it's wrong. You just don't like how it's being defined, and you're saying it's critical theory. You're welcome.
No,
you're welcome
to.
You're welcome to read the definition. And here's the thing, Altoids. I know that the term genocide is very triggering for Jews. Our frame of reference for genocide is the Holocaust. So I understand why most Jews don't like this term. It's nearly impossible for us as a collective to think that we could be doing something even a fraction of as horrific as what was done to us. I understand the resistance, but when we started this conversation, I said a genocide is not an intention to kill an entire population. And you said it's not. So I'll tell you, you haven't read the definition. You haven't really looked into this. You're having an emotional response to a word you don't like, which I understand, but don't come as if you are in any way an authority on this topic. So maybe look in the definition, look what the academics are saying, look what the human rights organizations are saying, look how international courts define genocide, and then come and make the case. And you know what? How about this? Because you are a host here, maybe set up a room in maybe a few weeks so you have time to look in it, set up a room, a conversation on genocide, and make the case for the community that it's not a genocide. I'm very happy for you to do that, but right now you're not coming from a place of knowledge. You just don't like the term.
Well, I love when the Jews, they have an emotional response, you immediately go into attacking them. But when the Palestinians are saying, oh, God forbid the Jews ever do this. But it's okay. We don't have rights to do emotional responses. But yes, even
Wait. Altoids.
Okay, this is just a pre-course. But the reason I said that critical theory is important to be understood in this case of why the word genocide is being utilized, and then I explained. Maybe you didn't listen. Maybe it's my accent. Maybe it's something that maybe you're just ignoring this. I said critical theory as a theory established by socialists and communists, which is fine. You could be a communist. I don't care. But if critical theory says clearly that language can be used for specific things. Language can be utilized to define things in a specific ways. And now in the West, in the left. The leftist groups, the United Nations, all these groups, they use the term genocide whenever they want to define something so abhorrent that even though it can or cannot be a genocide, they want to utilize the term, whether it is fitting for the case or not, to make it so abhorrent that it is impossible to make any arguments against the situation or for the situation, and you will be classified as an evil person. Easily. That's their whole reason. It is to dehumanize, to attack any person who may present any pragmatic or logical position on the conflict. Because if you say anything that has to do with the conflict, therefore you are a genocide denier immediately. This is what the same thing Omar was doing in the MENA dialogue circle, because in his opinion, this is a genocide, and there's, God forbid you deny a genocide. Which, okay, if there's an international consensus about it, which there's not yet besides the socialist people, then okay, we can make the argument here.
It's funny that you guys recognize the UN when it comes to 1967 borders, but once the UN start going against you and ruling against you, you start shifting it to the communist and conspiracy theories. It's really fun.
About the Balfour Declaration of the 1967 or 1948. UN declarations. It was all theory. In fact, they barely passed it, if anything, in 1948 in the first place.
You want 2025. You don't like 1967 or 1948. What you prefer is 2025. Continuous acts of genocide. Yeah.
I would prefer a UN that was not partisan. Yes, if the UN was not partisan and that it was not used by countries like the Soviet Union in the entire Cold War to weaponize certain things, certain agendas, or used by America, to be fair, again, to pass agendas. It was just a big agenda passing. Whoever has the biggest block of voters, whoever has the biggest clout can pass anything they want. If it wasn't that, I wouldn't care. But the truth is that the United Nations.
You know what you sound like? You sound like a person who's saying the Earth is flat for me.
So you're telling me there's no block in the UN?
I'm just gonna sit here while he's aside, man.
So you're saying that
Adar, we're falling into this rabbit hole with the genocide. Serge said something that's very important, and I want to respond to it because I think it's a sincere question about why didn't Egypt or Jordan create a Palestinian state? And I have to I think this is something that a lot of people ask, and there's a lot of Hasbara people, and I think that Palestinians also need to ask this question. And there's a really good thing. So I want to talk about. The Palestinian movement wasn't necessarily about land. It was about justice. Now, I could ask you the same question. Why didn't you guys create a Jewish state in Europe? That's where you guys were. But
I'm not from Europe. My family's not from Europe.
Okay, I'm saying in general, the Jews that came to Europe. But what I'm trying to say is that
there weren't just Jews from Europe.
The Palestinian movement wasn't, well, I understand that more than anybody, trust me. The point is that the Palestinian movement wasn't just about, hey, we're going to just establish a state at a time. It was about resolving justice for our people who had been displaced from their homeland. We don't need to ask Egypt to create a state for us. We don't need to ask Jordan. We don't need to ask Israel. This was a movement that was for the restoration of our homeland that was done to us and the displacement that happened to our people. So you are really simplifying it, detrimental to yourself, to your honesty to yourself, when you're saying that, well, Jordan could have created a Palestinian state. Because it was not just about creating a state, it was about restoring justice to the people who had been displaced. And you who claim to be a Jew, and a Zionist should understand this better than anybody. Because you guys could have went and created a state in Timbuktu, as far as I'm concerned.
We will going to create our state in our homeland, where we are from.
Then you understand what we're talking about, okay? So when you ask someone silly, why didn't Jordan or this create a state, then you know why.
I agree with support for self-determination.
75% of our people wanted to go back to the homelands where they were removed from, and that's what it was about. It wasn't about setting up a state sided by Israel.
You can have self-determination in the entirety of the Palestinian mandate. There's the Palestinians who live in the Palestinian mandate. They have the right to self-determination.
Altoid, seriously, I don't even know what planet you live on sometimes. Honestly, seriously, I don't know what planet you live on. It must be sunny in Miami or humidity.
Guys, let
self-determination. That was the issue. It was not the Jews not giving it to the Palestinians. The Palestinians got a self-determination in Jordan. They got self-determination in the West Bank. When they occupied in 1948, they have all this control. They could have taken a state. You may dislike this Hasbara, how you call a state, but the Arabs, who were the best friends of you guys, could have given you self-determination right there and then. The Jews were not telling you not to get your own country. They had the opportunity to do so. But why they didn't? In fact, the reason why the Israel didn't get kicked out all the Palestinians that were left in the West Bank in 1967 was because they wanted to give it back to Jordan. So if the Jews wanted to kick you out and give you no self-determination from the beginning, then they would have done it so already. But that's not why we are trying to get here. We're trying to give you self-determination, but it was not reciprocal. It never was. Maybe you believe in Jewish self-determination in the land, but the majority of the people was never interested in giving Jews self-determination. And under those circumstances, that's why there's a war in the first place, because we're never going to accept each other's self-determination claims. So, I mean, you can accept that you want, Justin.
I'm just gonna say something. I don't think it's.
Yeah, but it's funny because everything that he just said, Altoid, if you guys take over, you're going to massacre us. You're going to displace us. You're going to oppress us. You're going to seize our land. Everything you just described is what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. So, okay, congratulations.
What happened on the 7th of October? You had one whole day where you controlled Israeli territory and your
I'd also like to add something.
Killed most
wait. Real quick. We'll let Noam finish and Tal, then we'll give it over to you.
All right, cool.
So on the 7th of October, we had the chance to see what would happen for Israelis under the current Palestinian leadership. And what happened is, I don't know, a lot of them got murdered, a lot of them got kidnapped, and a lot of them got displaced. So all these doomsaying prophecies about the Arabs massacring the Jews when they take over came true. They or you had a chance to prove that they were not true, but they were proven to be true.
Tal, the floor is yours. Thanks, Noam.
I'd like to add this because I was arguing with another Jewish Zionist yesterday. A lot of these arguments surrounding whatever Israel is doing, or whatever public statements officials have made, or whatever public leaders, they rest on a continuous speculation or denial. Like, oh, I could say the same thing as well. I could say the same thing. It's a denial that their argument holds value because it is disliked or not seen as reliable to the narrative that somebody has in their head. And to that I say, well, the narrative that you have in your head is wrong. We are not a perfect state. We are doing very inhumane and incorrect things. And regarding the point of transgenocide, well, no one is very few people will argue that transgenocide is happening. It is not unreasonable at all to say that Republicans and conservatives have used genocidal rhetoric against trans people, treating their mere existence like a political ideology and discriminating against them, encouraging people to hunt them down and expose them, and using hateful languages that leads to hate crimes. The goal is if you argue that the goal is to exclude them from society, I would very much agree. So while very few people would argue that it's an outright genocide, it's not entirely crazy to say, hey, what they're saying is genocidal. There's a difference between those two things. When you have reached but there's a difference between that rhetoric and that level of action. And that level of action is something that Israel has that Israel is actively reaching and doing right now.
Floor's open for whoever wants to take it.
Sure. In response to the you, Dr. Atal, I'm not even going to get into the trans genocide thing. That's a different topic. First of all, I don't think it's a genocide. I just don't think it's a genocide, the trans thing. But I don't want to get into that topic. We can debate another time. But I just remember some points I said before about genocide. Now, the definition that the so wise scholars of the United Nations provide, I think is so flawed and it's so broad that it just doesn't help anyone, because therefore anything that has happened between that definition to this day, that's a war of any kind, can be described as a genocide. Now, I think a better definition, however, that's more in tune with the actual genocides that occur throughout history that are classified as a genocide, is when the powerful force that's committing the genocide not only has the intent and has said many ways, in many forms, through rhetoric, through papers, and through official policy, that they're going to do it. And not only that, they are actually, whenever they have civilians, unarmed civilians in front of them, they will actively eliminate them and exterminate them. Not just, I kill one civilian and I'm happy with my day. They have to actively be looking to the complete destruction of a community. Otherwise, it's just a massacre. There are many massacres that have happened throughout history. They are not genocides, according to most scholars and historians. But if the intent is to completely destroy a community, then they will kill everybody in the community, regardless of age, regardless of gender, regardless of militancy or not.
So if I say that I'm going to destroy 90% of all the houses of Israel so that no Jew will come back and live there, would you constitute that as genocide? And I'm the leader. Say I'm the leader of the Palestinian movement. And I say we're going to blow up 90% of the homes, and so that none of them will ever come back and live here. And if we kill them and those who run, they won't be able to come back to anything. There'll be nothing for them to come back. Is that genocide?
Are you ethnic cleansing, first of all?
Call it ethnic cleansing. Call it what
guys,
it's
I want to read something that I just saw on Twitter that's relevant. This is a quote from Melanie O'Brien, who is president of the International Association of Genocide, the largest and most important body in the study of genocide. This is a tweet by Shail Ben Ephraim, so I'm just reading it off. But this is the quote. Applying the legal definition of genocide as found in the Genocide Convention and the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court, I would determine that what is happening in Gaza constitutes genocide. Since early October 2023, Israeli leaders have made statements about destroying Gaza and starving its population, clear expressions of intent. Importantly, even if self-defense is invoked, that does not justify genocide. We also see intent through patterns of conduct, including indiscriminate bombings, mass casualties, the destruction of healthcare and essential infrastructure, and the denial of humanitarian aid, all of which can fall under crimes listed under the Genocide Convention. The deliberate denial of food, water, food, medicine, shelter, and healthcare, all essential for life, points to genocidal intent. People are dying not only from bombings, but also from starvation, malnutrition, and untreated illness, particularly in overcrowded areas where disease spreads rapidly. Genocide is a process, not a single event. So again, take what you want from here, but I think this is relevant to what we're saying. And we could keep debating how to define it for hours. Maybe what we'll do, Altoids, if you want, maybe do a deep dive into genocide and host a room when you're ready on the topic. And it could be, the room could be even an open discussion on, is Israel committing genocide, or you making the presentation, presenting the case that Israel is not committing genocide. We're all about, highlighting different perspectives here, so you're welcome to do that.
Going by the definition of genocide, it doesn't even involve killing people.
What's that
Should
now?
have some sort of outlet to international arbitrators, and maybe they can explain to us what genocide is here on this platform.
Yeah,
let's invite someone that's no partisan.
Well, so the thing is, people determine if someone's partisan based on if they agree with them or not generally, but we should. There's new John Spencer like guy, Brian Cox. He's like an ex-military or active military who's constantly saying Israel's abiding by international law, et cetera, et cetera. So he retweeted something I said about genocide, that its term is more broadly defined in academic and colloquially. And then I said, would you like to join me for a live stream to discuss this? And he said, absolutely. I reached out to him to offering a time. He didn't get back to me yet. I hope he actually follows through and joins me for a conversation, because that'd be one perspective who's very on the pro-Israel side. And then we should also find somebody who's taking the other side. And honestly, maybe see if they're willing to come on for a debate, because that would be interesting to have two academics debate this. But if somebody has a name that they'd like to see, somebody, an academic or an international lawyer who is saying that Israel's committing genocide, if there's someone you'd like to see on the channel, DM me and we'll reach out to them and try to bring them on as well. And I hope Brian agrees. Often people say yes and then they disappear, or they look at some of my content and for whatever reason decide they don't want to come on. I don't get it. I'm not threatening at all, but who knows? All right, guys.
Me personally, I would love to have either the Israeli historian Omar Bartov or obviously Francesca Albanese, but I don't think this is feasible at the moment. But it's definitely worth reaching out.
Omar Bar. It would be good to actually have an Israeli that's making the case that it's genocide. I think it's harder to accuse them of bias.
And it's not just that he is also just an Israeli. He's actually lived throughout many of the events in the past that we keep referencing. So he can provide a perspective that's both Israeli and fair, in my own opinion, and about history as well. And we're going to have these two debates.
Okay, yeah, let's do it. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap up the live stream. So those watching this, I'm dropping a link to Discord if you want to join. If not, we'll be back tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're actually hosting a panel of Palestinians. So it's going to be 4, maybe 5 Palestinians, series of questions. So feel free to already start submitting your questions. I will